Hey loves. So let's see. Today's video is going to focus on what it means to unburden the sexuality. So, as you know, I'm in the middle of this Grace Walker series. Last time we unburdened anger, the warrior. Now we're looking towards next Sunday, unburdening sexuality or the lover. And as I'm doing that, I'm asking multiple questions. And one is, sexuality obviously is huge terrain, and I've been exploring it and speaking to it for a long time. So, if I'm going to focus, on this 90 minutes that we'll have together, what am I going to focus on? What are the three unburdenings that feel particularly relevant and alive for me right now? So, I wanted to spend a moment with you just speaking to those. And then also, I wanted to share with you a couple of readings from one is from the hymn between the marriage hymn of Inanna, or the courtship hymn of Inanna and Dumuzi, and then which is a Sumerian hymn, and then also a reading from the Song of Solomon, just to kind of have us sit for a moment in a little bit of the transmission, the ancient transmission of what I'm gesturing toward. I know not all of you are on my newsletter list, and I mentioned in there that what I wanted to do, I had this desire to share a reading from Queen's Command is the second year of the school, and there's a reading in there of the sacred marriage from my experience, and I wanted to share that, but then I definitely got the no on that because it's so exposed here, even though, I love you, but it's a very exposed medium. So for those of you who joined, there will be a lover's gift, and I will speak that to you then. In the meantime, however, you've got some really potent things here. I'm the Song of Solomon and this courtship hymn of Inanna and Dumuzi. So here we go. The three unburdenings. So what in my opinion, what it means in this case and what we're going to be working with to unburden sexuality means to really step fully out of this pendulum swing between repression and reaction to that repression. From my perspective, my experience, there's a lot that goes on in that pendulum swing and in the whole reality that it creates. And if you step back from it, all of a sudden, you see that all it really is a pendulum swinging, repression, creating reaction to that repression, creating, a repressive reaction to that. There's this pendulum swing, and ultimately, it's a closed loop, and none of it is touching deep feminine reality. None of it is touching what sexuality really is, or really can be, and what the gift that it really is. So in this moment in this series with Lover, that's what we're going to do. We are going to step fully off of the pendulum swing. We're going to name it, look at it, so that we can step down off of it, get a little bigger than it, and see what really is there that is free from repression and the excessive and often ignorant and reactive reaction to that repression, right? Neither one of which is true. And if we're looking to really touch something true through sexuality, I'm assuming that that's what you would enjoy as well. It's just something that feels true, something that has the signature of the sacred for you, that brings wholeness, that brings the ancient, that brings you fully to the surface and actually, okay, all of that is, I'm assuming that you want that. If we want that rather than all this empty posturing, all of this porn driven and porn informed, kind of cheapened, easily accessible, these strange portraits, these twisted portraits of sexuality, and all the moralization that's in opposition to these things. We want to come out of all of that and be willing together to sit for a moment in all that we don't know, all that we may have forgotten, all the ways in which can we be honest with ourselves about what actually does feel really empty, what actually does just feel like a power play, how often or not we've actually touched something of true beauty in sexuality. Can we lift the volume on that? So there's a wonderful thing that we're going to do together in this particular unburdening series, which is to come down deeper be with each other in the vulnerability of sitting in some ways in what we really don't know yet, or haven't fully remembered yet, or have lost the thread on, and remember together, because it's never far. Once we actually turn toward it and know that that's what we're doing, it's never far. So we're unburdening from that. The pendulum swing and all that it creates, and all the rhetoric and all the confusion it actually creates. We're unburdening from commodification, which is so entrenched in our world that a lot of what even looks like it's attempting to free us from commodification is just commodifying our desire to be free. So, we're going to take a moment to feel what commodification feels like, so that we can really actually also step away from all that, all of those influences, all that's trying to always feed off of the beauty and the power that is female sexuality, right? It's been like this in various ways for millennia. So it's understandable that it's not always clear to us that that's what's actually happening. So those are a couple of the unburdenings. The specific some of the specific aspects of sexuality we're going to unburden. One is the erotic itself, kind of unburdening the erotic from all of this human contortion around it. What is the erotic really? And can we, knowing that we need the erotic, that it is connected to very much to our relationship to life and to God and to our true nature, can we liberate that from all the ways that it's been contorted and lifted us away from natural law, sacred law, that which protects and preserves and actually has reverence inside of being very erotic, right? And I'll read a little bit. So there's the courtship or marriage hymn between Inanna and Dumuzi is a Sumerian hymn discovered, or this particular translation is sourced from, writings found in 1750, although that's BC. Although the myth itself and the history of it is much longer than that. I'll just share this with you because when we're going to look together towards unburdening the erotic, we're going to look towards how do we just take human contortion off of our erotic current and return it to nature, to pure elements, to all that gives life, and the raw eroticism that's there, and just see what happens, right? So here's the hymn. Well, it's a very long hymn, but Inanna speaks. He brought me into his garden. My brother Dumuzi brought me into his garden. I strolled with him among the standing trees. I stood with him among the fallen trees. By the apple tree, I knelt, as is proper, before my brother coming in song, who rose to me out of the poplar leaves, who came to me in the midday heat. Before my lord Dumuzi, I poured out plants from my womb. I placed plants before him. I poured out plants before him. I placed grain before him. I poured out grain before him. I poured out grain before my womb. I bathed for the wild bull. I bathed for the shepherd Dumuzi. I perfumed my sides with ointment. I coated my mouth with sweet-smelling amber. I painted my eyes with kohl. He shaped my loins with his fair hands. The shepherd Dumuzi filled my lap with cream and milk. He watered my womb. He laid his hands on my holy vulva. He smoothed my black boat with cream. He quickened my narrow boat with milk. He caressed me on the bed. Now I will caress my high priest on the bed. I will caress the faithful shepherd Dumuzi. I will caress his loins, the shepherdship of the land. I will decree a sweet fate for him. So in that, maybe you can feel the the way that the erotic and natural law and the well-being and the fruitfulness and the abundance and the sustenance of earth are conjoined, that human eroticism, that our sexual current is part of the well-being of all of creation, and that to bring it to that place brings a kind of reverence and a connection that imbues it with the holy, a natural holiness, and a really hot eroticism, right? It's not, we're looking towards purity here. We're looking towards value, right? Like we're stepping away from all the ways in which the erotic has been cheapened through porn, cheapened through the media, cheapened through exposure, just cheapened and made into nothing. And moving to a place where it can be held in holiness without any need for moralization and without losing any of the erotic charge, because of its connection to the well-being of all of creation, and because of its connection to the wellspring that is woman, right? The tending that comes toward her, that she offers, right? So I hope that you can, I won't go too much into it, but in that reading, maybe you can taste a little bit of what eroticism is before it's pornographized, before it is made into a human commodity to be bought and sold, when it is actually held as a raw element, a pure element that we, and a beautiful, stunning, ancient, ever new covenant with all of creation that we get to renew through our sexuality if we claim it, if we turn toward it in that way. So part of what we are unburdening is the erotic. And look, I don't ultimately, obviously, there are many ways to approach sexuality. I hold this. This is my offering, right? And it's not the only one, and it's not the only way. However, I would say, and I would invite you to wherever you end up on the spectrum of all things, whatever ends up being true for you, to consider this. Just feel it. See what it feels like to feel that it could be possible that you be revered in a very simple, very honest way for the natural eroticism of your being and what you can yield as a woman, right? So unburdening the erotic, as part of that, and actually on the same continuum of that, is unburdening the virginal. And this is from observations over now more than a decade and many years now in the school of just kind of really getting to hear from a lot of honest intimacy from women. And the other thing we're going to unburden is the virginal, the celibate, the fallow. There's kind of these, and it's not as the opposite of being sexual, right? There are these times in life, I'm just going through one myself for about the past year, where sexuality goes fallow. It's not explicit. We are moving through other things. There's a certain kind of dormancy. The fire is different. The eroticism is different, right? But that doesn't mean that we're not sexual or that we've lost it. There's a beautiful celibate nun who's been in the school for multiple years now. And as she maintains her celibacy with an understanding that inside of celibacy, inside of not expressing your sexuality explicitly, it can actually ripen inside of you. She is just flowering. She is juicy. She is luscious, right? She's not dried up. There's a deep misunderstanding about the virginal being the only pure because you've never had sex, rather than the virginal being what it really is, which is you are one unto yourself. You are whole, you are complete, regardless of what you've done sexually. As well as the celibate, which can be chosen or not chosen. Maybe you just haven't had a partner and wish you have had one, or maybe it's a chosen thing. But that is not actually a dry and brittle state. It is not an asexual state if it's understood properly, and if it's given space to ripen into what it really is, right? So there's a repair that wants to happen there too, which is that you're not like sexual or not because of this, this definition of it, this tiny little definition of it. Your sexual current, your erotic current is your life current. It is part of your deep feminine wellspring, part of your supple, fertile, fecund, part of everything that you are. And it has so many expressions, and one of them is the fallow. One of them is deep quietude and a kind of dormancy that allows for restoration and that allows for a regeneration into something you've never known before, right? So I want to unburden that with you a bit because I know you'll all be in many different places, right? Then the final piece, well, and I was going to read to you. I feel like in the song, so the Song of Songs, look, here's the Bible, Song of Songs. Here's, the sacred marriage is so holy and so ancient and such a mercy for us. And it found its way into the Bible in the Song of Solomon, right? The bride's admiration. All right, but however, I'm going to need my glasses. That's right. Didn't used to be this way. Okay. I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valleys. Like a lily among the thorns, so is my darling among the maidens. Like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. In his shade I took great delight and sat down, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He has brought me to his banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. Sustain me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples, because I am lovesick. Let his left hand be under my head, and his right hand embrace me. I'm imagining you can see a certain continuity between those two readings, although we could say that in the Hymn of Inanna and Dumuzi, there is very much a satisfaction of desire. It is very much about the fertility and fecundity of eroticism. Whereas we move into the Song of Solomon, and now we're touching into a certain kind of refinement, that the banner is love, that there is this embrace, and that there's a longing. If you read more of the Song of Solomon, it's also a song of longing, right? So there's a lot in both of those and in many other places, but what I bring it forward for is that both of them hold this connection to what you could say, I would say, pure eroticism. This marriage, this kind of unnecessary and distorted separation between purity and sexuality. It doesn't happen just by acting like there's no such thing as pure sexuality or purity in sexuality. It happens by understanding what all that is really trying to get to. So something pure in sexuality doesn't mean it's not erotic, but it does ask, where does it come from and what are the fruits of it? A pure eroticism yields life. It yields liberation and abundance and the good, right? It's kind of simple. We don't get there through moralizing and repression and all those things, but we also don't get there through overexposure and through just cheapening the whole experience, right? We don't need to lose the holiness by shedding all this moral crap that has come around it, and all this contortion, control. Anyway, I digress. Unburdening that I want to speak to, which, okay, I'm definitely not going to be able to do it here. And of course, we're not going to be able to address this fully on a 90-minute call. But I want to look at unburdening the experience of sexual violation. Unburdening, obviously meaning not fixing it overnight. But what I am, because of who I work with and the way in which I work and the peers and priestesses I work with and all that they've been through in this body of experience, I've started to understand I feel like there are a few things that are important to unburden the experience of sexual violation, which obviously means it doesn't make it better. It doesn't change that it's not okay, and it doesn't change that there's a long walk of redemption to make medicine out of those experiences. But it does speak to the fact that, for instance, in circles of women that I have, usually about 75% of them have had an experience of sexual violation that they remember, right? It's an enormous amount of us that are somehow, for whatever reason, which, you know, we don't try to make it make sense. We just work with making medicine out of it, right? And for whatever reason, many, many, many of us are on journeys of redemption sexually. We are on journeys of innocence lost in order to be either reclaimed or ripened into sovereignty, right? And because I have been companion to so many women who have experienced the extremes of that and still come into wholeness and beautiful expressions of sexuality, I feel there are a few things that I want to speak to that I feel I can unburden the reality of what that journey is and all that it will entail and all the time and all the love that it will require. So those are some of the unburdenings that we are going to work with in this next part of this next installment of Grace Walker. Yeah, so it's happening next Sunday. I'll put all the details below. But you know, whether or not you join me for this, again, you can maybe just consider with me. Is it okay, and would you be willing to yearn for reverence and sexuality that is not cold or detached, that's actually very luscious? Would you be willing to consider that if you're in a time of chosen or unchosen virginity, celibacy, quietude, and explicit sexuality, that you are actually you could be, and it's meant to be actually a time of really profound sexual ripening and lusciousness, a contained lusciousness and saturation that you can't have in the same way when you're in an explicitly sexual relationship or explicit sexual state, right? And would you be willing to consider with me that the journey of redemption, that there is something incorruptible inside of womankind, inside of every woman, inside of female sexuality herself, that if remembered can help to unburden the journey of redemption that you or women you love are on in this lifetime, that many of us walk together, right? And that there may be mercy. There may be more mercy than we thought. Maybe we can touch that together, right? So much love to all of you. Blessed be.